Okay, and with that cough, we are live. So, welcome to the Rational Male 101. I guess this is a 101 show. I have with me Rian Stone, as everybody knows from Rule Zero. I don't have Pat with me today. I thought I'd inform everybody why I don't have Pat with me today, but I'm not really at liberty to say right now. Pat's just indisposed. Let's just say that. Nothing, no big deal, nothing, but he's just indisposed for a little while. So in his stead, I have Rian Stone with me today. So Rian, we're just gonna, we're gonna keep this casual today because you have missed a few flights to Brussels. Is that where you're going? Where were you gonna go?
I was trying to. Yeah, my friend was down in Brussels, and he was going to be doing some conference with his contractor work, and so we were going to head out. And haven't seen a bunch of the boys since we were sailing. So, But then this one magnificent blizzard that followed me all the way over to Montreal. So I've been stuck on the tarmac and 12 hours worth of sitting there waiting for flights to take off. John was hilarious, by the way.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, you should have sat in business class, man. It's way better. I'm like, I'm in business class. That doesn't fix the weather.
So I was going to ask you, I asked you off air, do you catch any of yesterday's Rule Zero show? I was kind of hoping you'd be on for that one, because the essay that I wrote that I wanted to sort of base it on, I just put that up. I think I put it up on Thursday, and it's rattling the cages that I thought it was going to rattle. I'm kind of trying to ease my way into probably a lot of the hate that I'm going to get once book 4 drops.
Right.
So I kind of, I don't know, sort of dipping my feet in the hate water. I'm dipping my feet in the haterade.
Well, there's an expert. You'd be surprised how well you can make outraged people go if you put a little effort into it.
Yeah.
He wears a red hat. You might know him.
Oh yeah. Well, this is the only red hat that I'm going to wear, and I'm only going to wear it today because I'm hoping my Niners are actually going to go to the Super Bowl. I will be. This will be about a 90-minute, no more than a 2-hour show, because I'm going to go watch the Niners right after this. So, I'm not like a guy. This actually kind of a dovetails nicely into what I want to talk about.
How big a sports ball fan are you?
I like football. I've always liked football. And I know that's funny because there's this element, or this, I guess, factionalization within the Manosphere, where it's like there's guys who are just like, yeah, so what, you like football, whatever, deal with it, kind of thing. And then there's the other guys who are just like, oh, you can't like football because it's just a bunch of overpaid millionaires chasing a ball around the field, and you should be lifting, or you should be doing something with more productive with your time, otherwise you're going to live this life of misery. Oh yeah, you think it's a good idea to drink and watch football? What's wrong with you? Like they're the cutting edge, the avant-garde of
I wouldn't even be that generous to them, because avant-garde is a cool sounding word, and knowing, I don't even want to say binary thinking. It's guys that want their tribal affiliation reinforced. Right.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because have you I know Rich is reading the book now, but like I've been telling you guys to get a hold of Alpha God for a long time. And now he's reading it, and he's like going, holy shit, this is really good stuff. One of the things that's one section, maybe it's like 2 paragraphs long, but there's this one section of that book where he talks about how like the analogies between like male tribalism and team sports sort of cross over. So if you look at, and of course he uses American football as the example. He says, if you look at American football, look at the dynamics, like well, first of all, the gender dynamics, but also the evolutionary dynamics that is part of this. So you have one tribe playing against another tribe, and it's essentially, it's a proxy for war. Pretty much every major sport, any kind of sport, is a proxy for war. Really, and even like even a board game is technically, your chess is a proxy for war. It's just us challenging ourselves against somebody else without actually having to kill them. But he uses the
our champion versus your champion.
Yeah, and so what's funny is he goes through this description of American football, and basically it's like it's tribe versus tribe, and then on the sidelines there is the fit young, fertile, reproductively viable women on the sidelines who are cheering them on, so that presumably they have sex with whoever the victor is. And so he was going into the idea that, well, I mean, actually a proven fact that when you win something, or when somebody he feels victorious, or when some guy like beats the shit out of another guy, he experiences a rise in testosterone as the victor of that conflict. And there are like subcommunication cues, and he was saying something to the effect that there was like pheromonal cues too, for women who pick up on kind of like the attitude of the victor, because he feels that rise in testosterone, which of course theoretically makes him more viable for reproduction. And so he goes into that whole description about like how American football is essentially the proxy for our old tribal warfare between, warring tribes between men, so that and the victors get to reproduce with the hottest chicks. And I was like, well, you're off now, man. I think you're either muted or I can't hear you. Hey, bring it back. Are you messing with the mic again? I still can't hear you. Okay, 1 second. So he says 1 second. What's the EQ? I don't know what the EQ is. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what Aaron Rodgers did. I like Green Bay too. This is actually gonna. Oh, there you go. You came back on.
Yeah, well, that's what I was gonna say. You ever notice that every sports team is always based on a city or a region? They're never. It's never like the All-American whatever. It's got to be Chicago versus Illinois. Yeah.
So when I was reading that, I'm going, all these people who are really down on sports, and it's not just like football. Everybody hates football. Well, I shouldn't say everybody. A lot of people in the Manosphere, for whatever, it's the weirdest thing to me, for whatever reason, are just like down on football.
Well, it's because the guys that weren't down on football were getting girls in high school, and the other ones were nerds playing Dungeons and Dragons. No offense to any D&D players here.
Yeah, that might have something to do with it. I'd never played football. I did play basketball actually when I was in high school. But and I played water polo as well, if you can imagine that.
Look at you go.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah.
I never pictured you for a swimmer.
Water polo will put you in like elite caliber shape. If anybody who's played water polo before knows why, because you're treading water basically for like hours on end. I see that too. I've always wondered why that is like why these guys don't like certain aspects of, I think, what otherwise would be approved, like thinking, groupthink, or approved think of whatever the Manosphere is. And so like when I see that, I thought, well, why would these guys be down on it? Because technically, and I agree, it is a proxy for war. It's a proxy for competition. It's testing oneself against somebody else.
So is esports. So is music. Even guys who are metal fans will always hate on the Yanni fans, and the Yanni fans will hate on the. I can't even think of any crappy. Who do I compare to Yanni? Like, really?
Yeah, it's all tribal. It is all tribalism, to varying degrees, I think. But
that's the problem I find, is those guys that like, don't ever watch sports ball, whatever. The problem they have is they didn't understand why that rule was there, so they just treated it as like it's sacrosanct. Meanwhile, it was because the guys who were unattractive that just sat all home all day drinking beer, watching sports, they weren't doing anything attractive. And so the idea was to stop watching football and go be the kind of man that a girl wants to suck off. But then they just took it to mean, as long as I don't watch football, she'll love me.
Right. Yeah. Or I think Donovan's talked about this as well, is like, it's interesting to see how if a woman is really into a guy, she starts picking up on his behaviors and his likes and his musical tastes and his sports teams and like the food he likes to eat. Yeah. And that also, I think, kind of goes hand in hand with that tribalism thing. And I think, well, and also, I never really made this connection really until right now, is one of the reasons why I think that women do that is because of the war brides dynamic. They had to have been like, if anybody has read my book and the section on war brides, I go into a section there about how I was constantly getting these questions from guys saying, how come women can move on from a relationship so much quicker than guys do? And why does it just seem like guys are more invested emotionally in a long-term relationship? And there's actually two sides of that, but the female side of that has always been because women in a evolutionary, historic, ancestral past sense have had to find ways, or sort of mental, like they had to develop and sort of evolve a mental schema or mental firmware to cope with the fact that they were usually the victims of like intertribal warfare. So if a superior tribe comes in and kills off all the men folk and kills off all the boys and leaves all the sexually viable women to take as war brides, which is why it's called war brides, women over the course of history had to be able to develop like sort of a tough skin and to really be able to deal with cognitive dissonance. So they had to fall in love with their captors so that they could survive. And then, well, this is a superior man because he killed off the other guy I had. So therefore, we're going to have better babies.
Well, here, I'm going to disagree with your framing, though.
Okay.
It's the same thing. Well, it's not that, because I always hate when people talk about evolution, like people adapted to this. It's basically you get a group of 100 girls, 50 of them cling to their former dude, 50 of them end up falling in love with the Germans after they roll through France. The first 50 are gone. The second 50 are there. So it's just the people who are more adaptable are the ones that tend to survive and thrive more. I hate the wording just because people always assume that it means our bodies are able to biologically change.
Yeah.
I know
like,
it's semantics, but I've watched so many Hitchens interviews. With
I get that, and a lot of people will throw that at me too. I try to throw a caveat out there once in a while. Like people will say, "Well, it's survival of the fittest." Well, yeah, it is, but it's
fittest and the hottest.
It's not like you weren't designed that way. It's just the way that environment and your things laid out, and that's how we became who we became. That's what I believe, anyways. But I think that one of the reasons why women have an easier time sort of adopting the likes and the teams and the food and everything of the guy that they're with, it has something, and I don't know how, but I think that it has something to do with that ease with which they get Stockholm syndrome. They have to fall in love with their captors.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of credibility with this in the psychological space too. I know if you've seen the Big Five, you know how borderline is considered like the female disorder and narcissistic personality disorder is the male one. Thing with borderlines is they have that same thing manifested, like amped up till 10, where they take their identity based on the person they're with and they fall for him hard. You dial that back to normal levels, that's literally your girl's dating you and then just likes the 49ers because you do. But the funny part they found, it's not that the girls liked it because they liked that you like it. They actually believe that they like it. So yeah. So it's not an act. It's not just there to make you happy. It's like they honestly believe it. And that ties into that self-deceptive part of, because I know that the sexes aren't, we do better complementary wise, but they're kind of built to be more combative. And that's why that constant deception and detection of deception mechanism keeps advancing. But yeah, so women are like amazing. Their tool is self-deception. It's not a lie if you believe it, Jerry. And that totally makes sense that I love the 49ers. I bet you do, Karen. I bet you do.
Yeah. Well, and I've actually with talking with Pat about this, I've said, Pat, I said, women can very easily hold two conflicting ideas in their head. Cognitive dissonance is not very difficult for women to reconcile, or if they do at all, they're just, whenever I bring up the example of like my poor girls talking about how they would love to go have a, one night stand or same night lay with a hot guy, but they wouldn't do it if the guy was boyfriend material, or if they thought that the guy was going to be had some sort of long-term potential. In that case, she would like make him wait and do all this other stuff. And I for anybody listening to that story, I've told it a million times. Anybody listening to that story goes, well, gosh, that's kind of whacked, it's cognitive dissonance. Can't they tell the difference? Like, yeah, they can. Yeah. So, and so I think
don't mistake what we want for what she wants.
Well, and then I think that, and I actually said this in the Andrew Hales interview is, I still firmly believe that women prioritize emotion before they prioritize reason, and men vice versa. So for us, when we see or we hear something like that, we go, that's crazy. That sounds irrational. That sounds unreasonable. It's for women. They're like, so, you know,
Yeah.
we'll work that out later. We'll get to the rational part after we, you know, find what's best for us, like how we can make our, you know, reproductive, you know, problem become optimized in some way.
And speaking of how you keep getting me to read Alpha Male, and I got on the list, I haven't finished it. I got one for you to never get around to get to reading. It's called Alchemy. Great book where it talks about that, where it's not rational, not being rational. It's being, he calls it psycho-rational. The idea is that we don't actually understand our own motivations, so we have like an element of self-deception as well. And that the whole reason that we developed logic and rationality as a species wasn't to learn the world. From an evolutionary perspective, it was to justify what we're doing to other people because we're a social species. Which makes sense then, that's why the guys that are overly logical tend to do really poor when it comes to being extroverted, sexually, you know, dominant. Was it 140 IQ? Your sex life drops to 0 or something like that?
Yeah, 160 for sure.
Yeah. And hey, heads up, Jordan Peterson, I think, is 145, and he married his high school sweetheart, so I'm leaving it there.
Yeah.
If she wasn't there, he probably would have been the guy selling dolls right now.
Yeah. Yeah, you might be right about that. I wonder sometimes, because I know, and I'm looking in the chat here, and I'm like, a lot of guys are going, well, thank God I'm a guy, you know, I'm reasonable, I'm rational. I get it. Yeah, I get it. Okay. But I think, and I hear this a lot, is I'll get guys who will say, people like, particularly from guys who are still kind of stuck in that blue pill way of thinking, is they expect women to be able to rationalize or to be able to be reasonable. And because they've been taught, and this kind of, again, comes back to what I was talking about in my last essay, which by the way was about a 4,000 word essay, and I was really kind of sketchy about
that was a slog, man.
Yeah, I'm like, I rarely go over 3,000, and if I go to 3,000, then I'm kind of paring it back. But this was part of my book. Well, the first part of this was from my book, so I wanted to get it out there and see what people thought. But I think that a lot of guys, because they're still stuck in this old way of thinking, and by old way, I mean, like, certainly part of that old order thinking is the blank slate, and thinking that if there is there's an equal and opposite reaction to every action. So if it's good for the girls, it's good for the guys. So if we're all blank slates, and if we all are equal under God or justice or whatever, which is complete fallacy these days, but if we're all equal, then what I think guys end up doing is they presume, or they end up projecting their sense of rationality onto women, because they think, well, I'm this way, and if women are my equal, then women must be that way too.
And of course it looks irrational then when you look at him as if it's a dude with tits.
Yeah.
Wait, can I say tits on your channel?
Sure, you
I don't want to demonetize you.
Well, you know what? I hate to say this, Ryan, but whenever you come on my show, I always get the yellow light.
Damn it.
Anyway, you know, I had Tristan Tate on Thursday, and it's still green.
Son of a! It must be a skin color thing. It's got to be. I feel bad. I said boobs twice now. I'll keep it PG for this. I think my goal is we're going to keep this one on the green so it gets proper, like, spreading out. Too many yellows.
I have discovered that there are certain, well, obviously there are certain words that if you use in the title or the description, or you use certain links in the description of your YouTube videos, you will definitely get the yellow light, just because it had the word red pill in it, or it had, you know, Manosphere, MGTOW.
Actually, I should be careful saying that too. Nerd City, a great channel on YouTube, actually did that, where they sampled like 10,000 video uploads. And it's not just the titles and the descriptions and all those tags, but because we have that voice to text option in here, it actually scans. So if you very clearly say certain words, like if you said singular, it counts. But if you say like feminism, that's good. But if you say like the singular person version of that, it actually starts to come up as a certain level of flagging, because then they assume you're trying to bully a single person.
Oh,
there's a whole bunch of words like that. It's really good. If you ever get it, it's like a 20-minute video. If you ever get a chance, it's good to check it out.
So like within the first, like, say 3 minutes of our video, we should just say feminism, 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 and hope for the best.
Yeah, like and a lot of the stuff makes no sense. Some words are just absolutely off. Like you can't mention anything about the certain Central European political parties. Like as soon as that word comes up, it's instant flagged.
Yeah, Tim
bombs.
Tim Pool has always said that a certain political group that was in Germany during the 1930s. That's how he says that.
We'll say the good thing with all this is we're teaching guys to speak with subtext and innuendo, which has got to help their game.
I forget who was saying. I was reading somebody's tweet saying, pretty soon we're going to have our own like little secret language that we all understand what things mean because we're forced into, making euphemisms and jingoisms to say something so it won't get caught by the algorithm.
Yeah, good. We're ahead of the game.
Yeah, finally.
Ours just got too popular, so now they're starting to get on there.
Yeah. No, I just getting back to what I was saying is as far as projecting our expectations of ourselves onto women, obviously I would say that is an old order way of thinking, and the reason for that is because I think that we've certainly since the sexual revolution, and I would argue probably before, even well before that, there is this idea that that we should have like men and women have like female and like it's the animus thing. And one of the big disagreements I have with Carl Jung, whatever you want to call it, is the animus thing. And that we presume that that's always going to be true. And I think that not to take anything away from the guy, but I think that because everybody's going to give me shit. But I think that has been bastardized and used certainly by feminism, but also by guys wanting to find, or certainly blue pill, beta male guys wanting to find some sort of workaround for their sexual strategy. And so when guys believe that women are just as rational, just as reasonable, like when I talk about how you cannot negotiate desire, it's really rooted in the idea. Why would a guy want to negotiate desire in the first place? Well, he would have to presume, well, of course, because he wants to get laid, right?
Yeah. Why do countries want peace settlements?
Yeah.
Well, they're not winning.
Well, because guys they want to solve their reproductive problem, and they want to do it in as pragmatic and as efficient way as possible. And so men are deductive problem solvers. So how do I get sex? I got to go and ask the girl how to get sex. And then she's going to tell me. And then, A plus B plus C plus D equals E, whatever.
And you notice too, not only is it deductive, but it's also very low investment.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The lowest they can. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's it, because it's efficiency, right? It's like, what's the shortest distance between point A and point B?
But guys, forget that. There's a lot of social signaling that has to do with just showing how expensive a signal is. And I know as Dr. Buss and Cindy Minston talked about the innate skepticism bias, women are hardwired to flat out either ignore or distrust low investment signals. So it's like the most unattractive thing you could do, which makes sense. Same as how war brides, it was like the ones that held on to the old armies were the ones that got killed off. In this case, the ones that went for low investment signals had the occasional, baby daddy just hit it and bounce. Problem with them is that single moms in the caveman days didn't do so hot, so they didn't really last. But the ones that held out, like you said, that girl that on the first date held out for 3 months and a ring first, she probably had more cave babies. And so now we have girls hardwired to basically not trust you unless you're giving away 3 months of your salary.
Yeah.
PUA was great for that because it learned, I don't know how, it accidentally stumbled upon that concept and learned how to fake high investment signals, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, it's showing, well, yeah, it's faking high value signals. It's aping, the behaviors of an alpha male.
Yeah.
And then using that to, and that's obviously that's one of the reasons why women get so pissed off at things like PUA is because it is,
because it works.
Well, because it works. Yeah. But it's also, it also bypasses their hypergamous filters. So, being tricked like that used to be, in our evolutionary past, used to be a life or death situation for women. It could literally mean their death if they picked the wrong guy who knocked them up and then, abandoned them and took off. And now, of course, that's what men are designed to do, is to spread the seed, hit it. What is it? John says, ejaculate and evacuate. Yeah. And get out of there. And usually because of that tribalism, once again. A guy gets in, an out group guy gets into the group, has sex with the girl, and then splits, because if he doesn't, he'd probably get killed by the brother or by the father or by her mated pair, boyfriend. You know, so you get the shit beat out of you. Shit, we see that today, man. Like somebody sent me a Twitter, like a picture of some guy who was like, just had this bloody nose and everything. And he was trying to defend Milady's honor and go in and break up some sort of fight between this girl and this guy. And the guy,
let me guess, the girl's the one that gave him the one.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the guy beat the shit out of him, and then she goes off with the guy, you know.
Dude, why you got to get in the way of a guy when he's getting those emotional highs and lows? That girl, people keep thinking that girls hate those negative emotions, and they don't realize as long as it's strong, they really enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why is it that girls stick with abusive husbands? It's because, yeah, they have their, and it's illegal, but they have their game on tight.
Yeah.
Bring up the attraction, bring up the emotional investment, then pop it back down.
Yeah.
So one day, buy him flowers the next.
Mm-hmm. And then also it unfortunately for that guy anyways, it also gave the asshole boyfriend an opportunity to beat the shit out of him. But also that is a display of higher value. Like, I have a capacity for violence. Here we go. Blah, 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 blah. And then she go, oh, great. And then what were we just talking about? Then suddenly he's the victor of the fight. And then the woman gets off on that and they go home and they have more babies.
Yeah, he's a jerk, but at least he's my jerk.
Yeah, you can beat the crap out of you.
Bear with me, I forgot to plug in my laptop. It's gonna die in like 3 minutes. I'm still listening.
I had a few things I wanted to talk about. The first thing I wanted to get into today was, of course, the hair when Harry met Meghan. And I know you were just talking about this, so I kind of wanted to discuss this with you too. I get it. A lot of people, like, if you go and you say anything about these two guys or these two people, and you're automatically you're a gossipy bitch, right? Why is Rollo? He's so over invested in this stuff. I can't believe he has anything to say about this. What's wrong with him? How can't he shut up about them? It's just like TMZ. It's just like the Inquirer or whatever.
Oh, and this ties in exactly what we talked about at the beginning about how people think you just shouldn't watch sports ball.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason that people say that, and it's not because of the gossip. You're doing a breakdown. You're showing it as a cautionary tale, taking a look at it, not so much as a gossipy way. Mm-hmm. But just, this is what you can learn from this stupid idiot here.
Yeah. Well,
I thought I knew for a fact because the podcast that weekend was talking about those two, and I'm like, I bet you somebody's going to make this connection if there's some rift between us. I'm like, nah.
Fully. Yeah. And that's the funny thing is, and I said, what's ironic about all this is, like, it's an easy rock to throw at me because I've said this since March of 2018. Like, this is the way it's going to go, guys. Watch this and this will happen. And so anytime I come up or somebody links me a story and I retweet it or whatever, people go, oh, I can't believe you're a gossipy bitch, man. Why do you follow these guys? Who cares? You know, get on with life. You know, how are you being the best version of yourself if you're watching Harry all the time? That's like, dude. But at the beginning, like, see, I've done 2 shows about, well, technically 1.5 because we're just kind of, you know, incidentally talking about it. But like, every time I talk about these guys, and every time I even put a tweet out there, I'm like, look, this is not because I'm like really fast. It's like, it's not like I'm watching The Bachelorette. Okay. It's like, I'm watching this.
Or no, what was it? Love Island that everybody was
into? Love Island. It's not like it's not like I'm watching that shit because it's like, I know Donovan does it. He would love to watch, he'd do breakdowns of The Bachelor or The Bachelorette. And I'm like, come on, man.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yes. Okay. I get it. But here's the thing is, like, when you watch what's going on with Harry and you see the interplay between Meghan, and then the other thing is, like, all the lessons that you can learn from this. I keep saying, look, I'm not trying to come down. I don't want the dude to kill himself. God forbid. You know, I would love for him to just read my book and, like, maybe change his life or at least get a different outlook on where he is. I don't think that that's going to happen. But to say, like, oh, you shouldn't talk about it, that to me is almost like more annoying than actually talking about it. Because what that says to me is you should shut up. Stick your head in the sand. Don't look at the dynamics that are going on in here. Don't use this as a warning. If anything, this is a high profile warning of exactly what blue pill guys go through when they literally giving up his princehood, giving up his ambitions, what's he going to do? What does he do? He's just her husband. That's all he is.
Actually, he was a pretty good pilot.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe, but what's he gonna? Is he gonna go be a pilot now? Is that where he's gonna go? Is he gonna go work for some Canadian airline?
Yeah, the prince is at Air Canada. He's flying me to Brussels. I'm like, I feel safe.
Yeah. But so I just.
But that's the difference too. Your guys talk about things, girls talk about people, and you were talking about the things. You see this scenario. Like, I don't know anything about Megan. I still don't. Apparently, she's on a TV show. I don't know if there's nudes of her out there. No idea. I know Harry basically from like the military stuff, and because I'm Canadian, we always see a little bit of it in the news. But you don't really need to know them on a personal level to understand the dynamic and what the problems are.
Right.
And that's the difference. And I can tell because you'll see tweets where everybody just craps all over Harry. Oh, he's a cuck and he's this and he's that. And right there is the difference between this situation happened because she did this and she did that, and he put up with it because of this. I know I'm really articulating it bad, but yeah, you're describing it the same way you would dissect a corpse after an autopsy, as opposed to what you would as if it was on The Bachelor.
Yeah, but you can't talk about it. That's the thing that gets me is I in my first book and in actually some of my earliest posts, I've talked about what I call the and I wish I could come up with a better name for it, but I've talked about what's called the male catch-22. So if you like anything that is part of conventional masculinity, anything that like we would say, oh, that's a real man, anything that is that part that is complementary to like a feminine imperative, we say, okay, that's good. That's good masculinity. And anything that doesn't, we call that toxic masculinity. And it gets to a point where guys are not allowed to talk about certain things. We're not allowed, like whenever you say, like, I think this is the most interesting kind of paradox, I think, for most like blue pill guys is they want to tell you that vulnerability is a strength, that you should be vulnerable and put yourself out there and you know, cry a little or whatever else that, you know, like vulnerability, chicks dig vulnerability in some ways, unless it's something that makes you sound like you think that you're a victim. And men are not ever supposed to be victims. So when you go and you talk about like what's going on with Harry, that makes it sound like I'm saying he's a victim of Meghan Markle. And I'm not saying that at all.
The two worst words, they need to be shunned from the manosphere.
Well, yeah, exactly. Or the like whenever we talk about if you say one of the things I think that throws off a lot of people about MRAs is because they bring up certain time, they might be, you know, justifiably brought up, but because a guy is talking about you know, male issues, maybe it's about like domestic abuse of men, maybe it's about something, you know, if there's anything that in any way would cast a man as being perceived as a victim, even like, you know, peripherally, even just like incidentally makes him look like a victim. Even guys will go, you're never a victim. Men are never victims. You need to be responsible for your, you know, it's personal responsibility and all this other crap. And it's like, well, how do you talk about that? How do you then dissect this stuff? How do I talk about Harry without sounding like a gossipy bitch? Right?
And that's just it. The only answer you can give is like a private clubhouse, like a Shriners Club or something like that. Because even I'm the same way, but I don't think you shouldn't talk about this stuff just for no reason. It's just because it's not going to be effective. Like there is no MRA cause you could champion as a guy without looking like a giant bundle of sticks.
Yeah. Yes. I got. Yeah.
Processing language filter.
Right. So you just did a video about all this. You just did a video about all this, and what were you talking about in that?
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, some hypocrisy here. This is more so for the consumers. Creators, we kind of got to go where your guys' attention goes. So I knew I'm like, I have to put out a Megan video. All right, fine. And that was really the only point, was that you can't live vicariously through others. And it was from an old Reddit post back when I was first on there, talking about things that keep you beta or things that are bad for you. And revenge fantasies are the worst. And that's the same concept where, well, I mean, a revenge fantasy is easy. Yeah. That Becky ditched me when I was 20, but now that I'm 30 and she's hit the wall, I'm going to get my revenge. Meanwhile, she's going to be just fine. People are sleeping with soccer moms all day. They don't even have to worry. But the idea of this seething resentment and like, oh, in the end, I'll win. It actually holds people back and they have a chip on their shoulder going through. And then I find these gossip things are the same way, because instead of actually addressing why their girl in their life may not be optimal, they live vicariously through, in this case, Prince Harry, and saying, oh yeah, Meg's just a bitch, whatever. But it's a what the hell the word? Something, opiate. It's like an opiate.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can tell I'm hurting this morning.
That you keep coming back to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, getting back to the part where I think that when I think guys like wait for shit like this. Most first
easy.
Well, if you look at it, and I'm not saying, well, I should say this. I guess maybe there's sort of a parallel to this. Like whenever you say something, like as a red pill guy, and you say something that's even in any way marginally unflattering of feminine nature, blue pill white knights are the first ones on the spot to go and say, well, what about men, or what about this, or they're there to defend milady's honor. Obviously that's what white knights do. I think we need to like look at why it is that is such a knee-jerk, reflexive response from guys, because it seems to me that when you say something like that, or when there's an opportunity for them to prove their quality, it's like they wait for those opportunities.
Low investment signals,
yeah, so that they can just step in. And I've always said this has been true really since my days at SOSWA back in the mid 2000s, is even in a condition of anonymity, when you don't know who's behind the screen, or whose avatar that is, or whatever, guys will still default to that blue pill, white knighting, or that blue pill
hardwired for it,
because they think that hopefully there's some woman within earshot, or will read this at some day and say, oh, I really like him, I got to go look him up, where does he live? Like there's some sort of possibility for that guy to prove himself to some girl, because that's their reproductive opportunity. Now,
the only thing I don't get is how it's still pervasive, because it's so transparent now. There's children who write cartoons just on the white knight thing, so everybody knows it's there. I just don't get why it's still a strategy and people haven't moved on from it. I've never seen it work.
Old order thinking, right? It's still that old order way of I guess processing what they think should be true for men and women. So if you're taught and you're brought up in a feminine primary blue pill way for since you're 5 years old, that's what you're going to default to. But like I said in that,
you got to figure after 100% failure rate, at some point the brain's got to go.
Yeah. Well, and that's actually kind of the point I was trying to make in the last essay here, is that at some stage and usually it's at a point of crisis for these guys. We always talk about how, like, the only time guys really unplug is when they're in trauma. And so they'll get to that point of trauma, and then they'll realize, maybe it's a false rape accusation, maybe it's a bad breakup, maybe it's your mom left your dad for somebody, whatever. There can be a million different ways that it happens, but I think as we get into sort of this new frontier, this new age of communication, where we see this every day, I think more and more guys will wake up. Like, when I've always said this, is like, I'm not going to be the one that unplugs the most amount of guys. It's guys are going to do it themselves, because they now have access to see the behaviors of women all over the world. Globalized. It's a globalized communication. So they see this happening all over the place, and they go, this seems to me to be a universal behavior, or maybe this is something that maybe the red pill guys, I got it right. This is actually women's nature. We'll follow along with that, and then hopefully unplug themselves. I know Turd Flinging Monkey said this before too. He said that even if you took away the red pill and the manosphere and MGTOW and everything else, guys are still waking up to it. And I think the genie's out of the bottle with that, with respect to that. In the essay that I wrote, I used several different examples of how old jobs are changing. Like, I used graphic design was the first one that I used, because well, I mean, remember back in the day when
lithographs and that, when you first
I used to do everything by hand, man. I used to do paste up art.
Before you got into university, did you draw the turtle or the pirate?
Oh, no, I didn't do that. I remember what you're talking about, though. Those little ads in the back of the magazines. No, the pirate. Yes. If you can draw this, then we want you. Yeah. I did old school paste up and web press, and not the internet, but the web press and offset press and stuff like that. I used to do that all the time. Yeah. But like that.
By the way, that's my favorite part of your essay, is when you gave the shout out to Quark Express.
Yeah.
Absolutely nobody.
Does anybody use? I think there's probably still some newspaper, the holdouts, the last holdout newspapers probably still use Quark Express, but I think everybody else is using Adobe InDesign right now. That's what I've used all of these for a very long time, but I use InDesign to put together all of my books too. So. But so the reason I use that is because that is an industry that was revolutionized, whether they liked it or not. But basically, it destroyed an old industry because there's a new way of doing things, but people were still stuck in that old way of thinking. That's from an economic position. That's one illustration from economics. What I'm getting at later on in that essay is that we're still clinging to these old ways of thinking about men and women. We're still clinging to the blank slate. We're still clinging to what we have, or what we're still, I think, hoping to be true about men and women's nature.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like graphic design, it took a little while, but it kind of caught up with the times. The one thing that's most important to people is like sexual relationships. Mm-hmm. And that seems to be slow as hell to gain any sort of traction.
Yeah, because we want to believe, I think we're at a point right now where guys are still doing a lot of guesswork, because I think that they see this. Like here's another example that I used was like journalism, for instance. Like if you go and you look at a guy like Tim Pool, and you see he's a citizen journalist. I think, what did he work for Vice for a while? I think he worked for Vice. Yeah, I think he was one of the lead guys from Vice. Left that so that he could go solo and do his own thing. And to his credit, he's the one. If I think of a citizen journalist, I think of Tim Pool.
Pretty much.
And I think he's a good guy, and I think he's really kind of waking up to a lot of red pill ideas, anyways, just slowly but surely. And again, why? Because he is immersed in it all the time and sees these stories and sees this. Like if a guy says, well, women are hypergamous, and here are 10 different examples this week, and here's 10 different examples next week, and so on and so on and so on. After a while, you go, okay, maybe these guys actually have some sort of insight on female nature. It was the same thing for journalism. Like when when you look at like these citizen journalists who are on the ground, and anybody on planet Earth is really a citizen journalist. Like we're the media right now because we have cell phones and we can take video of, the revolution as it's happening live. Yep. And we can see what's going on. And then, so like I see that, I go back and I flip on the evening news and I see how much bullshit the evening news wants to tell me, because I already know, because about 3 hours prior to the news coming on, I already saw what was happening on the ground, or I see the news that's not being reported there. And so I'm like, when we talk about fake news, we go, okay, well, here's how I know it's fake, because I just saw all of this stuff from multiple, sources, and you guys are telling me a different narrative. Mm-hmm. What have you been bullshitting us about before we had cell phones?
Positive ones. When I was deployed, I remember that CNN had a crew on. They were doing like a little news report. When I finally got to see it, I saw the little 5-minute blip they had, and then the newspaper article. And I'm like, man, that deployment sounds great. I wish I was on that. Like, it wasn't even close. Never trusted the media since. Mm-hmm. My wife now with her company, same thing. Every time a story comes out with it, she's like, yeah, I kind of know what happened here. And it's not even that they missed a detail. It's that it's flat out wrong. Mm-hmm. And I can't believe that there's people that have gone to school for 4 to 6 years or however long they have to go to, and purposely miss the point this often. I have to believe it's deliberate.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's still people today. I think really it kind of depends on what your worldview is, but there's still people who want to believe that the press isn't lying to us, right? They still have this old way of thinking. Like the more trustworthy news is actually the ones that you're getting on CNN or MSNBC or Fox News or whatever. Like that's the more trustworthy news, and you shouldn't like look at what all these other guys, the people who are right there. Don't listen to them. Who are you going to believe, me, the news, or your lying eyes? So, but that's what I'm getting at, is like there's still that old way of thinking. Like this is because I was brought up to think that the news was this way, was trustworthy. Therefore, I want to still kind of believe in that old way of thinking, because I was brought up to defend milady's honor, and to think in these blue pill ways, and to believe that women are actually, you know, sugar and spice and everything nice, and they're not what these guys are, you know, these red pill guys are making them out to be. I still want to cling to that. I still want to cling to men and women are blank slates, and we're just the same. We just need the right opportunities, and it's all social constructionism, and it's all this crap. But little by little,
down to a lack of adaptability.
Yeah, well, it's certainly lack of adaptability, and also when you throw an intersexual dynamics perspective into it as well, you have to remember that drive is for a basic function. You know, it's like for food or for air or for water. It's like sex. It's not just like the getting off. It's actually the reproduction. So if I am invested in an old way of thinking because I believe that old way of thinking is going to help me, you know, have a family and have kids and everything, I'm probably going to cling to that pretty tenaciously. But more and more, because we get into this technology age and we have access to more information, first of all, it's happening so rapidly that I don't think that we can really process it the way that we should. But even if we could, I think what happens is the more information we have, that information contradicts that old way of thinking. And we also, not only do we have to process the information, we also have to process the conflict between what this new information is telling us, plus the way that we used to believe certain things. Like another good one was, what was it? Josh Fluke is a really great follow that I've had him on my show once before. Mm-hmm. And he was talking about, and Aaron Clary also talked about this as well, is like the old way of us doing business, like corporate America, like, you know, working 9 to 5. Who works 9 to 5? Nobody actually works 9 to 5. You know, we get up in the morning to get out the door so that we're not late to work. So we got to go through the commute. We got to do whatever our boss says. Then we got to wait in another commute to get back home. And all of that, this old way of thinking is like, here's how we should be doing business because the boss wants me to be there. I could do everything I do for my job more efficiently and more comfortably in my own home studio with the computer that I have, which is exactly like the one that I have at work. I could be doing that here, but because my boss is still trapped in that old way of thinking, I therefore have to go there because this is how I can make a living. So again, old way of thinking, new way of doing things. And I think that the people who are going to, or at least going forward, who are going to make something of themselves or are going to be able to adapt to this a little bit better are the ones who are going to adopt the new way of thinking and be efficient at it and make it work to our benefit. I'm not saying like, oh, we should just abandon everything that was from the old way of thinking. There's still some good things about, you know, the old way of thinking. But understanding, a lot of people don't even understand that that's an old order way of thinking. And so they try to force fit the information that they get in this new order of technology and everything. And they try to force fit either that information back into the old way, or they take the old way and they try to push it into the new way of doing things.
That's my assumption is why this shamanism, MBTI and chakra crap is catching on. Because the God is in the gaps argument, it's weird to watch atheists give it. I got to admit, no, it's her MBI type. No, it's not that. It's something, it's chakras. And it's like, what? Didn't you guys just sit there with me watching Christopher Hitchens videos shooting down religion for being goofiness? Like, come on, man. Just because you haven't figured it out yet doesn't mean there's a pretty rational explanation for it that may not align with your desires.
See, I have a real problem with obviously with MBTI. I really have a problem with how we've deified, well, certainly like Jordan Peterson deifies Carl Jung as the Messiah. Like anything he says is like word from on high or something. I'm like, okay, and I said this yesterday too. I said, you know, people give me so much grief about that. They say, how come you don't you think that there are personality? Yes, I do think that there's personality types. Okay. I totally understand the big five, right? But when you go and you take that to the next level, when you make it woo-woo magical thinking, when you take the mystical, magical, metaphysical side of Carl Jung and you try to tell me that that's concrete, you know, evidence for what his theories, like we're still stuck in the way that we think about ourselves based on a guy's theory from the 30s. And we say, well, doesn't that, can't we just find some way to make that work with what we know now? It's like, no, man, I told this to Andrew Hales. I said, you know what, we need to move past this shit. I mean, yeah, I don't know if have you ever seen the, I think it was an interview of Yaron Brooks and Godsod, and they were talking about evolutionary psychology, and Yaron, I think is his name. He asked Godsod about Carl Jung, because Godsod is certainly not a fan of Carl Jung. And he says, look, and I tend to agree with him. I said, did he have some contributions to psychology? Yes, absolutely. But it's time we move past all this. A lot of his stuff was just woo-woo magical nonsense. And
yeah, because they didn't know that's literally the stepping stone to getting something going.
Right.
Of course, they're going to get 80-90% of it wrong, and that's fine. They're supposed to.
Yeah.
Hey, imagine if we had like the best stuff right then. Oh, you said
hang on 1 second. I gotta let the dog out.
All right. Well, I'll carry on this one. Guys, you were asking. Yes, I was supposed to be flying. I'm supposed to be in Europe right now getting drunk, but a blizzard hit. I got caught in the tarmac for 12 hours, and I caught here. So trip was canceled. Now here I am. We're talking about hypergamy, which is way more fun than hanging out with some old sailors in a beer garden. And then secondly on that, what was the other one? Somebody actually had a question in here about God of War 4. Dude, modern games, they aren't games anymore. They're sophisticated one-armed bandit gambling machines. Like it's so bad that even the EU has decided to like loot boxes. They realize it's gambling, and they had to crack down on that, showing the percentages in that. So yeah, they aren't games. They're time sinks designed to be as efficient as possible and getting you hooked on them. There's some good ones, but I've never played any of the God of War, so I don't know. Maybe it's like an amazing thing. I don't know.
I can't. Somebody told me the other day that like real-time strategy games were dying, and I was like, God, I hope not, because that's the only game. Those are the only kind of games I really like to play. I can't play first-person shooters, or I guess I could play like third-person stuff, but it's not like something that I have a real affinity for. But I do like strategy games, obviously.
Yeah.
I was going to say is like you're talking about how they are sort of gambling machines, or they appeal to that same, I guess, trigger in human beings about how gambling addicts get addicted. I've read a lot of stuff about how there are psychology departments in like Facebook or Twitter or Google where they intentionally try to make social media as addicting as possible. And it taps into the same reason why gambling addicts get addicted to gambling machines, which, by the way, I worked for the largest producer of electronic gambling devices and computer gambling devices, and they're based right here in Reno. And I will tell you right now, yes, they do make those as addicting as possible because it's in their financial best interests to do that.
Yeah. That's the point. If you don't regulate it, people are going to try and make them as addictive as possible.
Yeah. And
even like all of them are like that. Just that little dopamine hits. What was the other one? Intermittent rewards. That's the other huge one.
Yeah. Behaviorism 101.
And that's a sexual strategy you use. Like that's where the 2/3 rule came from with texting. People forget that. Like, yeah, a lot of the stuff that, pickup guys would use and red pill guys use, it takes those same things that get you hooked on video games and they use it towards, keeping a girlfriend on the hook or having a plane want to call you. Yeah. Super powerful.
I don't know if you saw this or not, but you know how much I love Diana Fleischman and her husband. But like Dr. Diana Fleischman, let me put the DR in front there. She had a series. I don't know if she did it on a TED Talk, but she had a college series where it was titled How to Train Your Boyfriend. And it was with behavioral psychology, which is something that I've been talking about really since the very early days of So Suave, is that women, she's just basically giving voice to what women would naturally do anyways, which
I was going to say, why do they need the
reward? I know you need some way to figure this out. But yeah, I thought what was funny is like she can go and give that as a talk at colleges, but if I were to go there and say the exact same thing and say how to train your girlfriend, I would be run up the they'd probably shoot me.
Yeah, well, why not? You get no. This is our tool. It's not yours.
Yeah. It should
just
be used for
what's that? Real politic is what they call this kind of thing. Is there like real sex with the fancy X?
Yeah.
At the end.
Oh, you know what? I got a few. I actually do have a few topics here for us to talk about here today. Well, so that's the first part. Anyhow, what I wanted to get into was old order thinking versus new order thinking, and I think a lot of people are going to have a real tough time with my upcoming fourth book, based primarily on that idea, because I'm not saying that I'm not saying that everything in the past was like, you know, discredited and we should all just forget about like Aristotle and all this, you know, the philosophers and the religious leaders. I'm not saying that we should forget
that,
about
by the way, because there's no longer earth, air, water, and fire as your four basic elements, but we still read Plato.
Yeah,
that's a perfect example of exactly what you're talking about.
At least I should hope so. You know, in the brave new world, we're not supposed to read old white men, right? We're only supposed to read whatever is, you know, approved by our leftist masters, I guess. But and that's another great thing, is if you go and you look at how we're educating the next generations, we are selectively abandoning the new information that we know now. The you know, like I said, in the essay I said this. I said, look, we can plot the human genome. We know more about anthropology, sociology, psychology, evolutionary biology, evolutionary psychology. We know more about this stuff than we've ever known before, but we're still clinging to those old ways of thinking, to the idea that men and women are blank slates, to the idea that you know, here's how we should all live, while ignoring all this mountains of information. Like, I'm about to get into it with Dr. Sean Smith and Dr. Glover about hypergamy pretty soon. And I think that
leave the poor man alone, would you?
Well, I hey man, it's not me. I didn't start this. This is on Rich. If this is on Rich, if anything. And it's like I like I like both of these guys, but I still think, particularly in the case of Dr. Glover, he's still very much clinging to that old way of thinking, because that's what's worked for him for so long. That's what he built practice on, right? The people that come in, it behooves him, or it's in his best interest, financial best interest, that hypergamy doesn't exist. It is in his, and that's point number one.
He had a very measured response too when you asked him about, or it was you or Rich asked him about that, and he said it was, I haven't seen an example of it in my practice, which I thought was so that doesn't mean he doesn't believe in it. He hedged that one.
Yeah,
so I think maybe he needs more credit than he's being given right now, but I could be wrong.
Well, and then I know that Sean Smith is writing something critical about hypergamy, and I'm fairly certain it's going to go something like it. It'll probably follow along the lines of pretty much everything that I wrote in my Hypergamy: The Misconceptions essay.
Right.
And I think that, because what happens is when people have an investment in something not being true, it's usually because they're clinging to an old order way of thinking, an old way of if, you know, this is how I make my money. Just like I was saying before, when digital desktop publishing came along and it destroyed the old publishing industry, it's like, here's new information, here's a new way of doing things. That old way is gone, and here's the new way. Adapt or die, you know, evolve or go extinct. And so what I'm expecting is this. What I'm expecting is, I'm going to set to define hypergamy as being whatever like black pill or MGTOWs are making it out to be, like this reason for hopelessness, this reason for nihilism, which is something that I've fought against for a very, very long time now. But what happens is you'll get guys, because hypergamy is something that is
it's monogamy.
It could be, yeah, but it's also, monogamy is another one, by the way, is an old way of thinking. And I hate to put it in those terms, because I still think that monogamy,
lifelong monogamy.
That's
why I say monogamy is hypergamy. It was actually from one of our guys. Because if you're her best option, she looks at you like the prize, and she's holding on to you for as long, and that's Briffelt's law, as long as there's benefit for her. And the same we said before, she likes your sports team, she likes what you eat, like she believes it with all of her heart and soul. That's basically, without hypergamy, you don't get that monogamy incentive there at all. And sure, now it's because there's no mechanism to hold her there when she doesn't feel it anymore. It's not the way it used to be. You're totally right.
Well, I think that's where they're going to go with it. They're going to say, well, these guys are saying that hypergamy is, there's no reason to be monogamous because hypergamy. That's what I think is going to end up being it's not going to be is hypergamy a thing? It's going to be, is hypergamy the thing that should prevent you from being monogamous? And I don't, honestly, I don't think it's going to be hypergamy that is going to be what convinces people not to be monogamous. It's going to be women's behavior. It's going to be polygamy. It's going to be us realigning ourselves for a new way of doing relationships in the future. We're already seeing it right now. All the stuff that I wrote about poly over the course of the last year, that all the things that lead up to that, that is what you don't worry about hypergamy. Worry about those elements of that whole thing. If you want to keep good families together and do all this great stuff, again, going back to monogamy, going back to families. Like when we talk about trad cons and we talk about like forming, doing, patriarchs, why is that appealing? It's appealing for the same reason you just brought up a minute ago, which is there's this want to return back to the old ways of doing things.
That's why old ways anyway. They were just how we remember them.
Mm-hmm.
Totally
that's why
not the same thing.
That's why I think you're seeing more people, like, for instance, like Roosh is going back to like, oh, I did magic mushrooms and I got back to the heart of, I saw God, right? I got back to the old way of doing things because I needed to ground myself or find myself once again. So now we're going to go and sun our buttholes, and now we're going to go do.
I love how that's taken off, by the way.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that great?
Probably healthy.
I know. Well, that's why we have healing crystals, and that's why we want to get back to this old earth root goddess, God, whatever, way of thinking. And I think that the more we advance, the less able people are in keeping up with that, the more they're going to go back to those old ways of thinking.
Yeah, and I think I can safely say Marshall McLuhan is officially the best University of Toronto academic to come out. I think he's beaten Peterson out because medium is the message. Mm-hmm. What you've just said there is more true of his work than it's ever been of Peterson's, which now, I got to admit.
Who is this guy?
Marshall McLuhan. He's the one who wrote The Medium is the Message.
Oh, okay.
He was talking about the move from radio to television, hot mediums and cold mediums. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's right. Actually, it's working the same direction instead of a structured one that you don't have to think, which would have been hot mediums. And that's like television. You sit there, you watch TV, everything comes at you, as opposed to the radio or a book where you have to imagine things. You have to picture how things are going. And you have to use your own senses. It just seems that sexually, during this monogamy reign of, I don't know, however long, from the Industrial Revolution to like the 60s or whatever year you want to pick, that it's no longer a given that the girl will stick with you through thick and thin because she needs somebody to tend to the fields. Now she can get her own office job, so she doesn't need any of that stuff. So we end up in these relationships where you have to use all your faculties as opposed to just, I bought the ring, I'm done. And a lot of guys aren't, and you're right, they're not catching on to it, but I just can't get the lack of adaptability. It's like we don't have a plague, so we're trying to invent our own.
Yeah, well, we can't go back to I think right now, and I've read lots of articles about this as well, is like we are multitasking at a degree right now that human beings have never had to multitask before.
Yeah.
In the essay that I also talked about, this is about mastery and how it is has never been easier there's never been a lower barrier of entry to get mastery. Like if you want to be a painter or a musician, or you want to be in some way master a craft, there are so many resources for you to, put 10,000 hours into something and suddenly you're a master at it, I guess is the formula. It has never been easier to do that. Whereas like in the past, you had to find a mentor, you had to find somebody to teach you this stuff. You had to be born into the right class. You had to have this kind of money. You had to have at least some smidgen of talent.
Not even a smidgen of talent. Your craftsmanship had to be perfect.
Right.
As opposed to now where good enough is like the theme.
Right. And that's funny because when you see all of like the old like master painters, right? You take Leonardo da Vinci or Michelangelo or all of the
I like Raphael.
Yeah, I was gonna say all of the Ninja Turtles. So you take all the Ninja Turtles.
Well, no, him specifically. He literally took all the best parts of all the other high Renaissance painters and he put them all together. So he stole from everybody, and that's why his art tend to be the quintessential Renaissance art.
And look what happened though later. And this is me because I also have a BFA. I have a degree, and I took a lot of art history. Thank you very much. But what happened, during the late 1800s and into Impressionism and all of that gets abandoned, and so it's like it's still good art. I'm not gonna say I don't like that stuff. I do, but it's a different it's
It had to be. And hey,
easier
technological
to produce.
difference. It's because the camera took away any need for realism.
Right.
And then so art ever since then has had this 150-year existential crisis where they tried to figure it out.
Yeah, and that's why art is shit right now, because it's too easy. Like, you're never gonna, like, it's very difficult. Like, even guys who are very good, like concept artists, very good digital painters, which I follow quite a bit. Thank you very much. One of the things I do is actual digital illustration, so I like watching that stuff. But that's where the mastery really is. But even in those really high end photorealistic work that, you know, maybe their works of fantasy or whatever, but they're, you know, look what they're doing. They're doing it for movies that are fantastical movies. They're not doing it for necessarily realism as it is, because you don't need to. You don't need, there's no real need to do that with digital photography. Another area that we sort of take for granted. When I did the body language essay on my site, which was about a little over a year ago.
Was it that long ago?
At no other time, I know, right? At no other time in history would anybody have been able to do that, because I was sent pictures from all over the world, from couples shots, from guys. And I put out a call. I said, look, send me your casual couples shots so that we can sort of like look at what the body language is and all of these things. And yes, I understand it's a photograph. I understand it could be posed, whatever. But guess what? The point I'm making right here is that at no other time in history would I have ever had access to anything like that. So now we can look at this and we can develop new ideas according to that data. Same thing with pornography. Like, if you go and you look at Pornhub's stats on their blogs and stuff, we know more about the masturbatory habits of American males than at any other time in history. And so what sense?
What do we do with the power?
What do we make of all of that? And up to now, it's like when I talked to the Tate brothers and I talked to Tristan last week, and I really like talking to Tristan, because he gives you the nuts and bolts of the whole thing, like how, why what he does works, why the cam girl thing works. Why he told me, he said, like, strip clubs are dying right now because there's no point in having a strip club anymore. Because you can just go online. Yeah, you could just exactly. You can just go online and you have infinite access to women who are. They'll be live. They're cam girls. They'll do whatever you want them to.
And that plausible deniability. You're no longer watching a stripper. You're watching a girl play Fortnite, even though she's really not playing Fortnite.
Yeah. Well, of course.
Or she's a conservative libertarian pundit, and you're just paying those Patreon dollars just because. And she happens to get naked. So be it.
So we still capitalize on human nature. We still capitalize on the way that other people still cling to their old way of thinking. That's why you get, like, what was it? Did you see the tweet of the mother and the daughter who had their own, like, Instagram accounts when they
I memed that. I put
cooter shots.
I put AJ's thing on top where he when the sun's shining. Yeah, that sounds like it's healthy.
yeah. I thought that was well. And then but like here, they don't have a degree in digital media. They don't have a degree in anything. They just go and they do it, and they probably make money hand over fist because they just do what instinctually I think most humans would understand instinctually is going to make them some money, or it's going to draw some attention. Women, when they go on Instagram, they're just following their biological evolutionary imperatives for attention and to broadcast their sexuality, and
the attention
can make money off of it. Great.
Yeah. Have you heard about pearl parties?
No. What's that?
Dude. Oh, my wife found these things and she's like hooked on them. They're just in China. They're trying to get a lot of pearls made. So they manufacture it with the oysters. They basically shove colored glass into them. And then these girls go on live streaming and just talking to other soccer moms. And like, they open the clamps for you, like gambling. And then, oh, you got a blue one, we'll send it to you. And it's like watching guys do Twitch streaming. But you're right. No quality to it forever. They all have the same shtick. They all work out of the same office. There's like 15 of them, and it's going 24/7. The bar has never been lower, and female attention's at an all-time, or male attention is at an all-time lowest price. And female, I don't know what the opposite of attention is. The part that gives attention, I don't know the fancy word for it, is at an all-time low. So the market is to the point where somebody can shuck oysters and make a killing online.
I talked to Tristan about what's the girl with the selling her bathwater, the jar, the Bell.
Oh, Daphne something.
Daphne Bell, Daphne, something like that.
That's not even the worst that she's
Daphne or something like that. Yeah. Well, yeah, she's not even the worst offender, But
she was licking raw chicken at one video, apparently.
But why is, because what's funny is I told my wife this. I said, look at this chick. This chick is selling her bath water for $30 a jar. Then of course, what she's going to say, well, what kind of idiot would do that? Like we're just we're dumbfounded by the idea that guys would do this. Like guys would spend this kind of money. She's probably a millionaire right now. I mean, she's like one of the highest trafficked, like, cam girls as far as I know. And Tristan was saying like she's managed by her boyfriend, which I fully 100% believe.
Oh yeah, somebody's pushing play on that camera. It's not her.
And so we're taking this, Belle Delphine. And so I'm looking at this.
Thank you for correcting us, you nerd.
Yes. And, yeah. Here, let me put that on there. There you go. This guy.
Yeah.
No, so I was talking to him about that, and Tristan was saying, that's just male nature, man. There's always going to be guys that are going to do that. So is it bad for him to capitalize on that? Because certainly a mother and daughter team are going to capitalize on it if he doesn't.
Oh, that somebody's going to do it, which never really passed ethical muster. But at the same time, I find the most red pill. If we had to put a philosophical underpinning to it, I would use the Melanian dialects, the strong do as they can and the weak suffer as they must. That's essentially it. And they're making a killing doing the cam girl thing not because they don't need to justify it. They're like, I'm doing it because I can, and you're not able to stop me. Say what you will about it, but it works. It's effective. And as much as a guy's like, I would rather have 5 kids in the suburbs, you're like, okay, I can have that at any time. Why don't you come have $1 million and live in Romania? It's not going to happen.
Well, it's like what you were saying before about like monogamy versus like poly. That people will give me grief about this, but I'm not saying that it's not a bad.
Jeff will give you grief over
this.
Yeah,
somebody somewhere will give me grief over this. I'm not saying that is a bad idea. I understand the desire to do that. I'm just saying that in this like old order thinking is not necessarily a bad thing, right? But in light of, we can't just ignore what is sitting in our laps because we want to believe something about the old order way of thinking about things. So like when I was when I was reading the Alpha God, in the very beginning of it, it's a very brief chat, or very brief, like couple of paragraphs, I think he was talking about how human beings have done religion for a long time.
Right.
And so like back when we were living in little sort of tribal units, when we were hunter gatherers, we had to have, and this is theory. Okay. I'm not saying this is set in stone. This is not, some religious decree. Just, I have to say older thinking, right? I have to, give you some caveats here. I'm not saying this is necessarily the case or whatever, but this is the theory, is that in our old way of thinking, when we were living in tribal units and we were unaware of other tribes around us, or we were more isolated, it was very much a localized tribal thing. Yeah. We had to create, or we had to think of our fears, or the things that go bump in the night, or the tiger that's waiting in the jungle, or the snake is another good one. The snake's going to bite the children and kill the children kind of thing. And so we had to make up localized stories, localized gods. And so it went from being the boogeyman, the alien in the dark jungle there, it could be the tiger to eat us up. That fear turns into the spirit of the forest, or the spirit of the sky, or or
pigs were a filthy animal by God's detained. So
exactly.
Pork and get salmonella.
We're getting up to that one. So then what happens is as tribes became, families became tribes, became countries, became nations, as humans developed into larger social groups, they had need for different gods. So when you look at, like, say, a city state that turns into like sort of a small nation, if you look at like Greco-Roman history, now we're talking about not about
polytheism. We switched to
polytheism. Yeah. So now we're talking about gods, but each god has its own little aspect. So it's not the spirit of the forest like in American Indians. It's now Zeus, throwing lightning bolts down at us, or Aphrodite or whatever. And what's interesting is it's cross-cultural. So you will see a pantheon of gods. Like human cultures go from the spiritual shamanistic kind of stuff to pantheism to monotheism. And then it seems
back to polyism, hence the 49ers.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because that's it. We want tribal affiliation. And this is where I will always disagree with Jordan Peterson, because Jordan Peterson always talks about the sovereignty of the individual. And I get where he's coming from.
Yeah, as an enlightenment ideal, that makes sense.
Yeah, human beings will always be tribalistic. We evolve to be that way. We think that way. Our brains we vote that way. We associate that. Our sports teams, from our sports teams all the way to our political affiliations, to our churches, to our families, the basic unit, of course.
Yeah, well, that's because three guys found out if you team up, you can beat up any Chad on the block. So it's much easier to be cooperative as opposed to combative.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he was talking at it from a game perspective, right? Like long-term, multiple iterations, people do better when they expect reciprocity. So being generous is actually a long-term self-invested strategy. Mm-hmm. So I get what he's saying there. So you make the individual sovereign, and the individual will act in that same way, the iterated prisoner's dilemma, where they never cheat on each other.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fine. The problem is that's all abstract. It doesn't really map very well to, hey, my girl said she couldn't come home last night. Should I be worried?
Mm-hmm. So, and Alex says this is Peterson opposes collectivism and supports dog-eat-dog individualism. Do you think that's true?
I think he exaggerated what Peterson said on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Like you need competition. He understands that metric. The whole point of the capitalism versus communism thing, and that's what Alex is talking about.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of centrally managed patriarchal authority didn't really work so hot. What worked really well is trusting everybody's best interests, with the occasional market intervention when people's nature ends up being unproductive.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing really to do with sexual strategy, but then that's the problem with everything. Like you say, and Peterson, all have the same problem. You guys say the sky is blue, and then people will bitch at you about sunsets.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, guys,
yeah, look at the bigger thing. I know it always comes back to semantics. It always becomes like, oh, I didn't like the allegory you used. Let me pick it apart in 7 different ways. So you try some. That's why
they don't take you seriously, but they take you literally, which should be the exact opposite.
Right. I am in the 4th book, and I'll just give you guys a little bit of a hint of something that's on.
How far along are you, by the way? I got my book now at the editor. 2 chapters are back.
I'm just about finished with the second round, first round of edits. That's coming back for the second round of edits. I'm hoping to have it out by the end of March. So that's, if anybody wants a heads up as to what's going on. It's funny. It's like every time I do the edits, I have to go and I feel like I have to go and rewrite the introduction again.
Oh, thank God that's common.
Yeah.
I've had 3 rewrites already.
I don't want to say that I want to get this thing done, but because I'm really putting I've put more energy and more effort into this book than any other of my other ones. The first one, of course, it is what it is, because the first one took me 12 years to write, because I started writing that stuff back when I first started, writing at So Suave and being a moderator there. So that's really took me 10 years to do it. This book has taken me probably about 3 years to do, so thus far. And so I'm writing it from scratch, and I'm really kind of push. And that's not to say that there aren't going to be some essays that I'm sort of.
It's not a collection of blog posts.
Not a collection of blog posts per se, but in it I talk about. Well, first of all, how women tend to be more collectivist than men, and now how our and this is partially what Hector Garcia talks about in Alpha God, is the reason why we have a monotheistic God that is a male is because men are the dominant the dominant species on planet Earth right now. And so he makes this point. He says. And it's from the very first quote in his book is that our gods tend to represent what it is that we can experience or we understand about this world. Mm-hmm. And so, like he was saying, I forget who the quote was, but he was saying, if horses were the dominant species on planet Earth, all of the gods would look like horses, and they would behave like horses, and they would, follow the same realities that horses would have. And
of course, because horses invented them.
Yeah, well,
I forgot. You got a lot of because whatever.
Well, but
I said what I said.
No, that's fine because horses invented it. Okay, but the thing is like that's the only. I talked about this with Elliot Hulse at the last convention I was at. Why do we think of God as a he? As why do we gender God? Shouldn't if you read the book, of course, it's like, shouldn't God have more to him than just the interests of what an alpha male human being would want? And I was thinking, well, how else do you understand it? Like,
well, God can't nag to anybody to get stuff done. He's it's ultimately on him. So I can see him not being a woman.
Mm-hmm. Bear with me here. There's a reason I'm bringing this up, is because like what I see right now is, so what I told you just a minute ago, how we go from like the shamanism to like the spirits in the forest to polytheism to monotheism, and monotheism tends to be patriarchal. In fact, that's what every feminist will tell you, is like, oh, religions are patriarchal. And I've been talking about this recently on Twitter, is what does a religion by women for women look like? What is that about? And that's where I was kind of
there's an example too, isn't there? Mm-hmm. Trying to think what would be a female led one. Closest I can think of is that stupid Nicolas Cage movie with the bees.
What does Sam say here? Sam says,
why'd you be a graphic designer instead of an industrial designer or architecture? Why Adobe and not AutoCAD?
Oh, well, I actually know AutoCAD is pretty well too. Any vector-based stuff I already know. I had to learn AutoCAD because I was doing it was like my introduction to like 3D modeling back in the day.
Yeah. My graphic design degree was both, because we still had to do package design.
I did industrial design. I did packaging and industrial design, but I did it for products. I did it for like, if you, I don't want to show you guys, you've seen the pictures of the bottles that I've done in the past. That's part of my packaging.
And guys, I guarantee you've seen them.
Yes, guaranteed. Pretty much everybody has seen the bottles that I've done in the past. Why did I do that? I don't know. That's what I was drawn to. I'll tell you what's funny is my cousin, who's about the same age as I am, actually got into architecture, and he's one of the better known architects, I think, of the United States right now. I mean, like, to the point where he's almost like a celebrity because of the things he's done. So I'll show you some of his stuff sometime. It's really interesting.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah, good dude. And also interior design as well as architecture too. So he does, the company he's with does the whole package. They do everything. If you want to, from the ground up, all the way to brand management,
all the way to the typography on
whatever
the
door.
You want.
Exactly.
I think people forget graphic design is like a very like anything that looks like something, there's some designer there. Icons, skeuomorphism, the packaging, the branding, the shape of the box. Sometimes even the engineering teams are basically based off a design thing. Like when that famous story of what's his face, Apple dude there, not Tim Cook, the good one. Steve Jobs, where they handed him a new iPad and he's like, or iThing, and he's like, I want this smaller. And they're like, we can't make it any smaller. And he dunked it into a fish tank. And he's like, all those air bubbles mean there's room. You can fit something else in there.
Greg's asking me, did you do an Absolute ad? No, but think of another vodka brand that is a competitor of Absolute, and then you'll know one of the brands that I've done. Yep.
Yeah.
Anyways, what else did I have on here? Oh, I've been meaning to ask you this too, because it sort of locks into something we've been talking about here. Is
right.
I was one of the first things that I talked to Andrew Tate about like a week ago. I started off the conversation about it was based on a tweet that I'd read, and it's a very common tweet. It says, what was it? Never compare yourself to like other people. Never compare yourself to who cares what other people think about you? You should only care about like, are you better than you were yesterday? Or compare yourself to who you were 2 years ago or 10 years ago, which I don't necessarily disagree with, but I do disagree with the idea that you shouldn't compare yourself to other people. I think that's, and of course, Andrew,
you mean like as a gut check, or?
Well, as a gut check, but also it's like, how do you measure your, like, a lot of MGTOWs will say this, and I agree that you should not use women as the metric for your own self-esteem, or your, they shouldn't be the measurement of like who you are, or what your personal worth is. Or
see, my disagreement is just to say that you shouldn't ignore it either.
Yeah.
Like, it's there, just put it in an appropriate context. Like you said, it's not the be all and end all, but you could be the greatest guy on earth, and if you're not getting any, well, then there's clearly something to work on.
Yeah. Well, I was telling Andrew this, that I disagree with the idea that you shouldn't compare yourself to other people, because you need some sort of objective reality, because that what happens then is you get into this idea of my truth versus your truth. Like, what's true for you is not true for me. And it's like there has to be some sort of objective standard. There has to be some way where we can say, like, when guys talk about like that girl's a 9 or that girl's an 8 or that girl's a 7, and we start talking, we try to make these objective objective like categorizations, I guess. And nobody's ever going to agree 100% with those things, but there has to be some sort of comparison that we make. And I think that it's okay when we do that with like chicks, or we look at these, oh, Harry's a beta cuck. Oh, wow. How did he get to be that way? Or, so what happens is, like, when I say, Harry's going to kill himself, or Harry's abandoning his princehood, or whatever they think I'm making a judgment call based on who he is rather than what he is. But you have to, I think we have to have some concrete objective way of quantifying ourselves versus somebody else.
And that's the thing, we're a social species. You can't just take human interpretation out of the equation.
Yeah.
But that's always my first argument when guys say don't compare yourself to anybody but yourself ever. I'm like, okay, so if I just smoke more weed and play more Xbox yesterday than I did today, then that means I'm a better person? Or am I still like a piece of crap because I didn't even bother going to the gym? Like, you always understand that other people do define to some extent who you are, because we're not tigers. We don't have our own little patrol area. We're people hang out with other people. We're like, was it bonobos and chimps are the two biggest ones that are close to us? So I hate to say it, but being unattractive is an objective standard that you can definitely be or not be. And the only way to know for sure, even though if your mom says you're hot, if no girl wants to touch you, kind of lets you know something's up.
Yeah.
You're not using them as, well, I'm not a valuable person because no girl wants to touch me, but kind of are.
I think it's important to have at least an objective understanding of what you're about.
Yeah.
And that's really tough for, I think, a lot of people, because first of all, they want to make things subjective, the old order thinking once again. But I think that we don't do ourselves any favors by not looking at ourselves in the most realistic light that we can. Yes. So here's the other thing is I kind of agree with you as well.
I think that's the key. It's the realistic filter of life.
Yeah, but also, just because you don't measure up, or you don't feel like you measure up to someone else's success or someone else's lifestyle, like Rich always says, this is like, would you want to trade, lives with that person? Take their advice accordingly. You still have to say, is this compare yourself to that person and say, would I want to trade lives with that guy? And I think that we don't do ourselves any favor by trying to cling to these subjective ways of sort of estimating ourselves. And I think really this is more like a girl thing than a guy thing, because women want to, to be accepted. I want to be accepted for who I am, what was it?
The community thing. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that might be the difference. From a guy, you're sizing other guys up. Am I better than that guy? If the girl, I could get her, as opposed to what you're talking about, that definition of like, well, they won't like me unless I do this, or they won't like me unless I'm this big enough. And you're right. It does have a feminine quality to it. And I don't want to say quality because it's not a quality, but I can't think of a better word to describe it.
Yeah. What's this guy say? This is pretty funny. So, Rollo, if your girl tells you why she can't go out on her girls' night out, if you go out for a drink with a couple of mates. So I guess I get it.
We're equal. We're not equal, babe.
Yeah. That's funny. Like, when guys tell me, if I say something that's unflattering about women, the first gut reaction from these guys will be like, well, what about guys? Guys do it, and guys do it worse, or guys do it too. It's not that guys don't do what you're saying that they do. It's that you can't, that was your first reaction. Like, I think that a lot of blue pill thinking and a lot of female thinking, especially, is to distract away from the actual point that's being made right there. Like, I have to stop people in their tracks when they say stuff like, oh, well, you know, it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. If somebody says that to me, I go, stop right there and ask yourself, why did you just think of that right now? Why is that your first gut reaction when we are just talking about, you know, male versus, you know, a female dynamic or a male dynamic? It's not like I don't talk about male dynamics. I do, but like when I get this, and I'm sure you get this too, is guys, mostly guys. Here's funny is I get most of my critics are not women. A lot of women.
I miss when it used to be feminists.
Yeah, I do too. I miss when I used to lock horns with Susan Walsh back in the day, because, you know, I think a lot of women agree with what I have to say, what you say, what Rich says, and it's mostly guys who get upset because we're sort of, you know, upsetting what they believe should work for them, right? If I'm complimentary, if I'm accepting of women, if I'm identifying with my feminine side, then therefore women will like me. I can't have this guy talking about this stuff and upsetting my dreams or my ideals about how men and women ought to be.
Oh, and it's that should part that bothers me too. If it was, this is what's working for me, at least I get it. I'm getting in the way of his hustle, and maybe I'll still do it, but at least I understand where he's coming from. But this thing you're doing is getting in the way of what should happen. It's like all you're getting mad at is that I'm destroying your fantasy.
Right. Oh man. You know what? I'm going to write this down in the great big book of everything, because we need we need to talk about should versus is at some point. I don't think we've ever talked about that.
Ooh, categorical and hypothetical imperatives. We're going to start getting into human stuff.
We need to talk about that, because I think that, like, remember when you sent me Whisper's article
Purple
on
pill
like,
debate thing?
Yeah. Well, empiricists versus the believers, and how we don't even speak the same language right now. I think that part of that disconnect between like guys who are more concrete, like the empiricists versus the believers, is that believers are always about what should be, and empiricists,
well, they're always about deferring to an authority, is technically what it all came down to. And that's the female way of thinking. Who's the moral authority? Who's my hypergamous best option in like a leadership perspective? Then whatever they say is true. That's all there is to it. That's why every female argument towards a red pillar is usually shaming him for his physical appearance or his attractiveness. Like, you remember Roosh? The one photo everybody remembers is the one time they got him in his underwear at his mom's house in London. And that was the photo they showed out. Or Robert Fisher, when they finally caught him and they found out who he was, the guy who created the Red Pill subreddit, it was always pictures of him at his fattest. They didn't care what he had to say. They didn't care if it was true. They just needed a reason to say he's morally inferior so he could be ultimately dismissed. And that's how that's the female equivalent of a guy threatening to stab you. That ultimate reputation attack. And then excising. And that's cancel culture. Same thing here when everybody who just got Molyneux, where he just got kicked off a MailChimp. That was literally a bored soccer mom who wanted to flex, got him kicked off and exiled from the tribe. That to a woman, that would be like potential suicide right there. And they'd like using this tool on guys. And then the conservative guys that cry about it as the victim, they're playing into it. And I hate how you told me that men being raised as defective women line, because now I can't not see it absolutely everywhere. It's ridiculous.
Well, they think that, and another great way of old school thinking, I think that like just what you said right there, like ostracizing Stefan Molyneux from, you know, cutting him off from his platform or whatever, for little girls who are sort of being acculturated from 5 years old on, to them, that's why I keep saying like attention is the coin of the realm for girl world. But for a little girl to be ostracized from the group of girls is like a fate worse than death, because they're social, they're little socialists. And I don't mean like they're politically that way. I mean, they're collectivists. Maybe that's a better term. They're little collectivists, and they depend on one another in that little sort of rudimentary social network of little girls in their little group of friends. And the worst thing you can tell one of those girls is, I'm not going to be your friend anymore. they will lose their shit. And then of course what happens is that if they are ostracized from the group, what are they going to do? They're going to go form another little group, because now it's like, we're the outcast group. So there's no
the goth girls.
There's no Sigma females. You know what I mean? Like there's just like the Sigma males, like for Vox Day always talks about Sigma and deltas and alphas and stuff. Like the Sigma male is sort of like the alpha that doesn't fit in with the group. He's like,
the alpha from a different group, basically.
There are no Sigma females. There are no girls who are just sort of mavericks or something like that, as much as we would like to.
Can we just say that all of the socio-sexual hierarchy, there is no women of any of it?
Like,
guys actually work to make this stupid little hierarchy that sort of makes sense. And what are the first thing girls do is they put fucking dress on it. Like, geez. Yeah, alpha female. There's no alpha female. There's just the hottest chick in the room.
Another old order of thinking. And I've locked horns with Dr. Babe about this in the past. I don't know if she's still, I think she likes
By the way, can I just laugh?
She likes me now. She didn't in the past. What's that?
I'm just laughing at the contradiction of her name.
Dr. Babe.
Yeah. Dr. Babe.
Yeah. Well, everybody knows what I'm talking about when I talk about the Dr. Babe. It's Taylor Burrows, I know. And you know what, I'm not going to tear her down or anything like that, but like, I think she can speak for herself, but
she'll be just fine. The thirst is so rampant. I could call her the worst name under the sun and she'll still be better off than me in 2 years.
Well, she used to talk about like how, and this is, I think this is almost like a process that a lot of sun hat goddesses have to go through, is they go from being that they recognize that they need to be more feminine if they're going to get a man. If they want to get a guy, usually what they are is single mothers who have come to Jesus or have come to, Trump or whatever. They've decided that now look at all these red pill guys. Look at all the patriarchs. I really want one of those guys. So they try to play that game as well as they can so that they can attract these kind of
and because you goofballs in the audience keep running your mouth anytime something red pill comes up, they know exactly what to tell you.
Right.
Get on that MAGA hat and sit there and then screw you over. Then you come back telling me, what's happened? Carolina Hermes, she doesn't like me anymore.
Part of that process of going from like the way she used to be to where she is now is this, I think, this re-embracing of the feminine. One of the reasons why I think that, the 22 convention, if it's attractive at all, it's usually because I would say it would be attractive to people or to women like that, because they want to be in the presence of guys who they think are going to fit that new ideal that they have for themselves. And one of those things is the re-embracing of femininity. Like, oh, now I want to be found. I was a feminist before, and now I want to embrace my feminine nature. It's almost like it's
just like how Michael Jordan wanted to embrace his basketball career when he went to his baseball career. I mean, it's like way too late to start pulling on the little girl thing. But
part of that is
I guess better late than never. I don't know.
Part of that is the conflict, because as I said, sisterhood uber alles, and part of that conflict is that women still want to pretend that they can be this beautiful feminine, attractive feminine mother / good looking, soccer mom, and also be an alpha female and cling to the idea of the alpha female. And that's, I actually wrote an essay about this. There's a contradiction in terms there, because that's old order thinking that a woman can be an alpha female. And the reason I say that is because when we think of an alpha female, what we're really thinking of is an alpha male with tits. They follow the same dynamic as an alpha. Well, I go out there and I get things done, and I run the business, and I've got my own business, and I'll pay my bills, and I've got all this money. And I think really going forward into the next decade, you're going to see the idea of the alpha female sort of morph into something a little bit more, maybe turn into a monster at some point, because more and more women are.
Well, didn't that medical company chick there didn't she kind of kill a bunch of people and do some fake medical tests?
Yeah.
They've already had their monsters.
Elizabeth Holmes, yes,
that's the one.
Yeah,
but I try not to argue with people.
They want to believe it. Yeah, it's what should be, right?
And I don't like arguing with the people who think they're alpha females, because I'm thinking back to the praxeology of the dominant man and Ian Ironwood post, where a writer came in and she said, "I'm basically doing all these feminine things because it makes my man happy." And she's like, "I get it. He thinks he's the red pill leader, but I'm pulling such a fast one on him because I'm just acting like this because I know he likes it."
Yeah.
And he had the greatest response. He's like, "But you are doing it, right? Good enough."
Yeah, exactly.
Like your motivations don't matter as long as you're acting right. That's all that matters.
Yeah, Chris Redfield. Yes, I did see this. He said, "Did you see the video of daytime talking about 22 Con and ripping it to shreds?" Yeah, it was. I think that's like sort of the low budget version of The View. that one, I think I posted it in our DMs. The where they're kind of,
dude, 2 million views though. I may have to do that Nerd City Thought Patrol type video where it's like a commentary video, basically taking down this thing. Because like, if he's gonna go through all this route to make us all look bad for clout, it might as well at least jump on it and do exactly what I said not to do with Meghan Merkel.
I was gonna say I will be happy to join you for that as well if you decide to do that. And then, of course, I don't know if anybody else knows this, but a rumor has it that that the president of the Manosphere is going to be on with Piers Morgan pretty soon. So
I would never brag about that. He's been the biggest dope for as long as I can remember.
Well, and like I keep saying, like I don't think he's going to do it. I really don't think it's gonna fly. But what he's doing is following along the old school Milo Yiannopoulos, Mike Cernovich / Roosh, circa 2015, also in an election year, and just trying to cause the biggest ruck. It's what I call,
as long as you learn his name, it's all he cares about.
Yeah, outrage brokership. And at the end of the day, like, he's not selling the 22 convention, he's selling the 21 convention right now is what he's doing, because nobody's part of this.
And I was worried too. I'm like, I've hearing him speak in person. I'm like, I hope he knows how to handle himself on TV. But then I realized Cernovich did all right with that giant lisp. So maybe you don't even have to be that photogenic or charismatic on film to get it through. I don't even know.
I don't know. Are they going to show it live or is it going to be recorded? I'm not really sure what the whole thing's. The
only way I'm going to watch it is when I'm sitting in bed on my phone, and then you text me the link to it, and then I'm going to click it because I'm laughing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I just don't even care.
Yeah, and I get it. Here's the thing: is I think that all of that crap is going to end up being just look at what happened to Roosh. Right. Look at what happened to Milo. Milo's even a better, what's happened with Milo since 2015.
Well, that's the thing. The only two guys it worked for were Cernovich and Tucker Max, I would say. Maybe Mark Manson, arguably. But those two did the switch to what you call it, the script.
Yeah.
Those two did the script, and Cernovich just went straight from there into providing journalism.
For people who don't know what the script is, it's actually an essay that I think I put it in this third book. It's an essay I wrote about the predictable path that men follow when they go from being sort of this, well, today we would call it red pill alpha kind of bachelor guy, PUA, I guess, if for lack of a better term, to renouncing their ways. Julian Blank is a good example of this. Tucker Max, good example of the script.
I think I saw Julian on one of my YouTube ads too recently.
Oh, he did.
I think he's in the same studio as the 21 convention because I recognize that curtain.
Oh, really? Julian Blank?
I was like,
that would be interesting to see Julian Blank do that. I don't know. Maybe they are. Maybe they decided they all wanted to go the Tony Robbins route.
Just saying though, after all that money he earned over the years, you could have got some dental work done and just fixed that at least.
Get your grill.
Jeez, man. I don't mean to dunk on the guy, but yeah, I mean, I kind of do. Whatever.
Well, I do want to dunk on the guy because if you go back and you look at his tweets from like 2014 talking about how if any guy was to ever get married, he is therefore blue pill, or he is, especially if you already know all this stuff, you should never get married and blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, in 2019, he tweets out after his marriage, the real test of an alpha is to get married and to be married and to take care of a family and all this other crap. And so I'm almost ready to believe you that maybe he is in cahoots with these guys. But yeah,
I said, it's just, there's that clear split happening. There's the BuzzFeed side, and then there's the actionable content side. And it's becoming more and more clear the longer this stuff goes on. Yeah. So I'll give Anthony credit. The one thing he's good at is at making sure there's a line drawn in a very clear line in the sand, and people are clearly stepping on one side or the other. And it's letting me know who to avoid like the plague.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, I think as far as the script is concerned, it's like you'll see these guys, like Tucker Max is a really good example of this, where he goes from being this freewheeling bachelor kind of guy who's writing, I hope they serve beer in heaven, and has himself as the, with some anonymous chick with her face blanked out and says your name here, and then his mate book is him after he's knocked up some girls, married, and now his face is the blanked out one, and his wife is on
and
the
girls
cover.
buy it. It's the boys will be boys, but now he has to grow up and man up and do the thing,
right? And that's the
as long as when they need you, you're acting right. That's all that mattered, apparently.
Yeah. Well, and what's ironic is that in some cases has always been the plan. And so they go from being this freewheeling bachelor who is, I'm going to come on your tits to I'm going to, I want a nice traditional conservative woman who's going to make me sandwiches and, have babies for me. And without a hint of irony, without like saying, well, that's just how it was. Like even Julian Blank has renounced his, Playboy ways. And that's part of the script is the idea that you're going to be this freewheeling bachelor. You're going to meet the one, and the one is going to convince you to
start acting right.
Yeah, to start acting right. And women love that because it's
a female fantasy, the breaking the horse.
Oh, it's not just a female fantasy. It's also a religious fantasy. It's a religious parable.
Yeah, same thing.
Yes, it's the prodigal son. That's why you can't talk shit about Roosh. Because he's come back to the fold, right? He reinforces the idea that that I was right. Like if that's your religious, emotional, ego investment in whatever your beliefs are, if that guy is agreeing with those and is coming back from all of that to like he went out and he was whoring and he was hookers and blow, right? It was all hookers and blow. And now he's coming back. It's the same thing with the script. It's the same thing as Julian Blank going out with hookers and blow and then deciding to get married. And now guess what? That reinforces and that affirms or validates the beliefs that these women, of course, had. And they're happy to have him back on The View or whatever to talk about it and go, see, we are right after all, ladies. And then it reaffirms the whole intersexual dynamics between all of them. So
I don't like it though. It's that kicking the ladder out from under him. If he wanted to do that as his personal goal, that's great. But then he started getting rid of everything he did. Like all my books are off, taking this off, shutting the forums down, no talking about dating. It's literally the guy that, and let's say that is the perfect path. To be like Roosh is the greatest goal a man can achieve, hypothetically. That's great. But he just denied everybody else coming up behind him that exact same epiphany that he needed to hit. It's like Luke waking up after 30 years of being the Jedi and then throwing away wait, he did do that.
Yeah.
It's basically, the red pill version of the new Star Wars films. That explains it so much.
Well, it's an archetypal story, which is I was the bad guy and now I've come back to the fold.
Yeah, which is fine, but then you don't kick the ladder out from under you because all you're doing is sabotaging other people for your own gratification. And I find that extremely selfish and short-sighted. And that's my problem with them.
And it's not the first time that this has happened. So like when Roosh decided that he wanted to split from the red pill
was that before or after he got that girlfriend?
Oh, that was before, before. That was in 2015, and I can show you the videos from where he was talking about how he's the father of the red pill and that we're all part of his seed.
Yeah, I remember that stuff. I thought I kind of cringed. I'm like, dude.
And I
like even you, they call you the Godfather, but that's kind of like a tongue-in-cheek one, and you're just owning it. That's your N-word.
Yeah, it's fine. I've never referred to myself as the Godfather of the Manosphere. I've had Pat and you guys and everybody else has said that, so I'm like, okay, I'll go with it. But I've never said, "Oh, I'm the Godfather."
Yeah, you can't buy your own hype.
Yeah. And if I was if it's hype, I probably would have chosen something other than the Godfather. But okay, whatever. If that's what you want to call me. Okay.
Yeah.
The hype.
We would have also not chosen the Manosphere.
The Grand Poobah. Well,
it's almost like the thing is the names that we get are the absolute worst ones we could have possibly had.
I'm glad you brought that up because I don't know what to call. Like we have a need for terms in this red pill, in this Manosphere, and whatever the hell we're calling it. We need terms. And when I actually in the introduction again of my fourth book, I have to clarify terms because I'm writing this book in the sense that I don't expect everybody to know the
so this is the first read of a Rollo Tomassi book,
right? Yeah, because I want my old readers to read it, of course, but like I'm also targeting like new religious. I want to get it into religious bookstores. I really do. People will laugh at me for that, but I want to reach those guys.
I just can't believe there's religious bookstores. Like, how many copies of the Bible can you sell?
Yeah, well, no, there's oh man, there's so much. In particular, I talk about this in the fourth book as well. Is the women's ministry movement is pretty much the evangelical Christian way of selling the same kind of stuff that Tony Robbins does. It's exactly that same grift with a Jesus Fish logo on it, and you've got Beth Moore and whoever else selling their books. And it's almost like a self-help thing, but it's also a religious thing. And there is such a huge, you'll be stunned at how big the market is for this kind of stuff. That's another thing you can
picturing a Chiro, but with that, like the male female sign with a a little arrow coming out of it.
Mm-hmm.
If you guys know, the Chiro is like an
Chiro, the Chiro,
Chiro. Thank you.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
Make that all feminine, like the queen, like the prince symbol.
Yeah, well, because like I think that we need to have different terms right now. Like when I say alpha or beta, I'm still going to use those terms. Sorry, because there's nothing else that I can. Again, they're placeholder terms. They're abstractions. If you can't wrap your head around that, then just don't even read the book. Just go back to whatever. Go back to bed.
Well, that's why I like this language filter that YouTube and social media is using now. It's kind of forcing us to, how would we describe it otherwise so I don't get banned? And a lot of people are getting banned, but like it's I bet you in the next few years, a lot of those terms that need clarification and redefinition are probably going to come out of this.
Mm-hmm.
I see the opportunity in it.
Yeah.
Just sucks though, because I really liked calling people bundles of sticks. It was a nice way to like get the point across that you need to ignore tone and focus on content, but yeah, it's got to be something else we can call people. I think incel is now in.
Well, and here's the other thing. It's what sort of woke me up to this was the whole thing with Sean Smith and Dr. Glover about hypergamy, and just how easily that term gets redefined or not recognized as like the broader definition for hypergamy. Yeah. So if you're going to say,
branch swinging, I noticed that, and beta bucks are the two things it gets most conflated with. Just means she'll leave you when she can get paid. It just means that she's going to leave you for a better man. It's like, no, those are two different things.
Yeah, that's two, and both of those are misconceptions about hypergamy.
Yeah,
and so what happens is then you get guys who say that, and then you get the guys who disagree with that, and they're like arguing over a definition of hypergamy that nobody who broadened that definition would ever have any agreement about. Like when I listened to Jordan Peterson on Joe Rogan once, and he started using the term hypergamy, he started using it in the way that I've been fighting to expand the definition. And then what happens is guys go, well, who are you, man? You're just some Yahoo in Reno, Nevada. You shouldn't be able to redefine what hypergamy means.
I'm number one on SEO. What are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly. I know. And so then it's academia, or excuse me, it's credentialism. Then suddenly you're not qualified. I got to have a DR in front of my name before Dr. Tomassi has to say.
Back to what we were just saying about the whisper thing about how women argue that they want the authority. And if you don't have the authority, then you have no right to speak. It's that's the feminine imperative. People keep thinking we talk about it like the boogeyman, but then you start showing these concrete examples and it kind of clicks for people how pervasive effeminate reasoning and thinking and speaking, it's just gotten into everything.
Well, like when I heard Jordan Peterson using hypergamy by the definition that I've been trying to sort of normalize for a long time now, I was like, oh, sweet justice, finally he's gonna recognize it. But then of course he starts talking about it, and he's only identifying the beta buck side of hypergamy and not the alpha fuck side of hypergamy, because that's all he knows.
Well, it's because he's slow learning.
Well, it's slow learning, yeah, but it's also it has to be complementary to the woman. Like whenever I mean, the nuts and bolts of hypergamy is alpha fucks, beta bucks. Simple as that. And we can, from there, I can pick it apart. We can go to the biological reasons, the sociological reasons, the anthropological reasons, all of these other reasons why hypergamy is a thing. But it basically comes down to women's mating strategies, looking for high quality men who exemplify the best, genetic. Oh, I got to go get my dog now. The best genetic specimens with the best provisioning specimens. That guy is the ideal. So it's really a balancing of those ideals right there. and then it gets a lot more complex from there. But what happens is, and I blame you MGTOWs on this, and I blame you incels, and I blame you black pill guys.
Yeah, finish that one.
Black pill guys, okay. Black pill guys.
Oh.
Because I get why there's this sense of nihilism that's attached to it, because they want to use it as a reason to just give up hope, to say, oh, I'll never get a girl because I'll never be her ideal, because as soon as why bother getting into a relationship with a woman if all she's going to do is find the next best guy who walks along.
You notice that though? It's all sniper game when the guys talk about it like that, in this nihilistic despair. It's always that girl won't. And they don't realize it's not about that girl. It's about more girls, or on average, more girls.
Right.
Abundance is the only abundance, and our feet, our ability to walk away, are really the only general tools guys have as their version of hypergamy.
When I did my essay on the global sexual marketplace and what the differences were between local sexual marketplaces in the old way of thinking, the old order way of thinking, and the global sexual marketplace, which is where women find themselves at right now, and what guys are having to come to terms with their competition amongst other guys, not just being the dudes that they know in their social circle or in their hometown, but like guys from all over the world now. So that's one of the things that triggers guys kind of like nihilism or their hopelessness, because they think that if there's no point in getting into a relationship, because it doesn't even necessarily have to be the guy walking down the street. It can be Chad from, Ghana, or Chad from, Germany, or Chad from South Africa.
Basically, why talk to a girl if it's not going to last forever?
Exactly.
Which is weird, because you're not going to live forever either. Where's this permanence argument coming from? And it's not it. It's just fear of rejection. And that's just a sophisticated layer on top of it.
So now you throw Rollo Tomassi in between that guy who wants to give up hope and thinks that the definition of hypergamy is that he's got no chance in hell to ever start a relationship or get with a woman. And then I've got to mitigate that against a guy who believes him that should be the definition of hypergamy. And I have to convince both of them and say, look, you're not hopeless. And no, this isn't the definition of hypergamy.
You know who did a great work on that? It's somebody you wouldn't have expected. It's this chick I follow on Twitter. She's my connection to the thought world, Danny California.
Yeah, I've seen her occasionally.
Yeah, and she brought up this one thing about, hey, ladies, how many times have you had to sleep with a fat guy? And then girls were letting their when I slept with the fat guy stories. And the same groups that you're ragging on now, the MGTOWs and that, were just livid because, well, if these girls are sleeping with unattractive men for reasons that had something to do other than looks max, well, then everything I thought of was wrong. So clearly it's her fault, not mine. And they just junked all over it. And I thought that's almost what the Manosphere, the sphere, whatever you want to call it, it's almost what this place needs, is a lot of physically unattractive but extremely charismatic men. Like, we need more conks.
Yeah.
Because that really does fly in the face of all of this looks max type 2 jaw nonsense. And that's the problem, is because we can't do it any favors, because we all work out and we all eat well. So none of us will ever be ugly enough to snap some sense into a MGTOW who thinks all that matters is looks.
Yeah, that's another thing. It's like, I don't think people really realize like it's like herding cats, I have to wrangle cats here. Well, because like I'll talk to guys who think that looks are everything. Looks maxing, get the facial surgery or whatever you need to do. Guys will say that, well, that's all there is to it. And I have to say, look, there's a difference between arousal and attraction. So I got those guys. Then I got the other guys who are saying, well, all you need to do is get a lot of money, move to a country in Southeast Asia, and then chicks will get off on you because you have a lot of money. And really, that's all it boils down to.
Yeah, because Warren Buffett was just swimming in poon.
Yeah, or what is it? All sex eventually becomes transactional, not validational. So just earn. What was it?
See, that's the problem with that, is they always think there's only one currency. There's more than one currency.
Yeah.
Validation is currency. Attention is currency. If you're a homeless chick on the street, maybe just a warm place to sleep is currency.
Yeah. And then I deal with the guys who are like, game is everything. Game works no matter what. All you got to do is have the tightest game in the world. It doesn't matter what you look like. You can be a fat, pig, and women will love you because they'll still want to have, like, you can look like Owen Cook and what's his fat friend's name? I can't remember. Oh, Luke. You can look like RSD Luke and chicks will just fall in your lap. Right.
But it's so much easier just to drop 20 pounds and then get your game up to about 70% of where theirs is.
And of course, my response to all that is all of those are incomplete ways of thinking about how attraction and how arousal works. And would you not be in better, in a better position if you dropped 60 pounds and you also had some semi-good game and you were making,
and you can do them both at the same time. That's the thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Would it not be better for you to have most, if not all of these things? I keep saying is like people keep throwing this at me. And this was, I think when we were doing Real Zero yesterday, guys were saying, oh, you need to talk to this guy who's I don't think he's a MGTOW, but he's all, what is it? Looks, money, status, LMS, something or other. You guys will, I'm sure somebody will pop it in with the thing, but they keep telling me to go check this guy out and that I need to debate him. And I'm like, well, what am I going to debate? We'll probably agree about 90% of what we talk about. But I think that if all it is one of those things, then that is like trying to make up two deficiencies with one thing. So yeah, if you're really super good looking, yeah, you can get laid. You can still get girls and stuff like that. But wouldn't you be better off if you actually knew game and had some congruency between your looks and actually had some money? Wouldn't it be better for all of those things?
Oh, that's the thing. If you really want to just unilaterally apply this stuff, you put the LFA, make it as a use case. Mm-hmm. All looks, all game, all money. You put those against a guy who's balanced in all three or skewed, so you have like 5 or 6 use cases. Mm-hmm. Obviously, nobody's going to meet all these people in real life, but I guarantee you put the guy who's not unidimensional, like a Transformers cartoon. Mm-hmm. Like people are complex. So if you have a combination of these skills, I guarantee you a point of depreciating returns when some guy gets, I'm just using arbitrary numbers here, gets past that 80% level of game to like 90%, to 95%, to the point where all he does every day, all day is do approaches. So he's broke. Or the guy who looks so good, but he can't string a sentence together and he lives on the floor. Like there's a certain point where, yeah, he might do slightly better in this fictional example that's put in a vacuum that's never going to happen. But that's just a paper. That's like talking about socialism. It just doesn't work in real life, even if it works on paper. Mm-hmm. And so I find when guys argue about this stuff, and I think that's what you're describing when you say it is like you read this in a book. Go try it and let me know how wrong you are, because anybody with 10 minutes of experience talking to girls will tell you looks max is ridiculous or game max is ridiculous or walking around flashing your fancy cash is going to be ridiculous too. It just doesn't work that way.
I need to, I keep telling everybody, like, I don't know if you've seen any of my more recent interviews. Like I talked to Andrew, Andrew Tate. I also talked to Andrew Hales. I talked to Aubrey Huff, which I thought was really great. If you haven't seen the Aubrey Huff,
I've seen the Hales one. I haven't seen Huff or Tate yet.
Huff was actually, that was, and I love me some Aubrey Huff, but he that was unintentionally very, very good. Well, I mean, because he's a great guy, man. I'm stoked to even know the dude because he's like a World Series first baseman, and I'm doing the interview with him. I'm looking in the background. He's got this like World Series trophy just sitting in the back. I'm like,
sitting there, yeah.
All right,
dude, that's funny. That's like how I felt when I'm sitting there getting interviewed. Like, this dude's on the UFC. There's YouTube videos of Dana White talking to like Fitch there when Fitch had me on. Not only did he have me on, but he played me like a Fiora Elise on a ukulele. I'm like, dude, this guy beats the crap out of people for a living.
He's a good dude. I'm looking for more guys like that. I've got a few other people that I want to sort of branch outside of the Manosphere
autism spectrum.
Talk to. Yeah, that too. Well, who I'm talking about. Like I feel like we need to branch out beyond the Manosphere to like people who's like Aubrey Huff is a great example of this. I want to talk to a guy who's on, sympathetic or simpatico with the stuff that we talk about. He's not a Manosphere star, but we still have.
Well, those are the exact people that are doing this, and there's hundreds of them behind the scenes that aren't making a public face. The public face guys, for the most part, and I know we're public face too, so I might be even just condemning us, but for the most part, are guys with huge deficiencies that are horrible cheerleaders. Mm-hmm. And so these average people, or somewhat exceptional people that are normal functioning people, give a way better example, and they really work at filtering out all those autistic spurg takes like looks max. Mm-hmm. Like you're never going to hear a first baseman talk about looks max.
Yeah. Well, why would he? It would probably never would occur to him to even think about these things.
Yeah. Meanwhile, he'll give you 50 stories about how to approach a girl successfully.
Yeah. Yeah. Or how
which one's more valuable, really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, look at Aubrey Huff has looks, and certainly back in the day when he was playing, athletic, has a lot of money.
Yeah.
You know, maybe at status, all of these good things that everybody says you have to be successful, but yet he was still very blue pill. And that was what really led him down a dark path. And that's what we talked about. And so it's like, for all these guys who want to say, well, it's only about, you know, looks, money, status, da 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 da. No, you still have to know, you know, understand intersectional dynamics. You have to understand your old order way of thinking and move yourself away from that. All right, man, I gotta go.
I just realized it's 2 hours.
Yeah, it's been 2. I was just looking up here too. Thanks for coming on. Is there anything you want to? What are you doing? Are you doing anything new coming up?
Books at the editor. So we're 3 chapters edited. Come back now. Once all 15 are done, the book's going to be out. I'm hoping I get that done a week before yours is ready.
Wow, you'll be done before me. Trust me. I've got how many pages is yours?
It's 55,000 words. I'd have to do the math. 250 per page. I think it's like around somewhere between 150 and 200. So it's not huge.
You're under 300 then. Okay.
Yeah, I'm under 300.
Yeah. See, my third book was like pushing 350, and this book is going to be pretty close to the same. So,
see, I could have kept it going. That's the thing, because it's a combination of, I always say, it's take Fight Club, 12 Rules for Life, and the Tucker Max book, and combine them into one. It's essentially what this is.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
It's all my pickup stuff. 15 examples of me winning or losing in pickup, and then lessons I've learned from it.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's good. You're in no way doing anything that I'm doing, and I don't think that Rich. I know Rich has got a book coming out. Everybody's got a book coming out this year. The reason I asked about page count is because there's a lot of
because you don't want a 99-page pamphlet.
There's a lot of pamphlets out there, and those in that case, you may as well just do an ebook, or if you're going to do like under 99 pages. You should keep it as a PDF and sell it through Gumroad. You will make more money doing that if you do that.
Which makes more sense. But no, I'm all bells and whistles, professional editor. I'm going to get somebody else to do graphic design, maybe hire you. I'm not sure yet. You seem busy, but
well, I did.
Works. I want this thing to be a proper polished product.
I did Hotep Jesus's cover, and I would have done his interior for him too, but he just wanted me to do his cover, so I did that for his book. He's got a book out now too.
Hey, that's funny. They did the Gendernomics series.
Yeah, this is gonna be the year for like Manosphere books for sure. So
think about that. Ever since Delicious Tacos got his book out, guys are starting to read again.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what's funny. I meant to say this earlier on, is like since I'm writing this book more or less from scratch, it impressed upon me how difficult it must be to do fiction or to do stuff like
I know, right?
You're going to have like an outline for, you have to have a basic, for me anyways, I got to have a basic outline. It's tough to do like nonfiction, and because
doing fiction would be like paint a painting for me.
Yeah.
And then that's the only advice. You got to work with that.
Whatever you want to do, man.
At least nonfiction, it's got a constriction to it, so you can work within a framework.
And then the other thing is, this book is, and I'll give you a suggestion here. This book is, the way I'm writing it is different than I would have written it, say, like 6 years ago, when I was a whole lot more verbose than I am right now.
Oh, so it's tighter.
Well, it has to be, because I'm trying not to. I don't want to just write for the audience of like the Red Pill or the Manosphere. I'm branching out. I want other people outside the sphere to pick up on this and say, what's this about? And hopefully they'll read this. It'll resonate with them, and then they'll want to read, like, say, book 1, which also I'm in edits on right now as well, because I'm going to do a second edition of that this year. Nothing content is going to change, I'm going to tighten up the text, I'm going to tighten up the grammar, I'm going to make the font bigger so everybody can, so like me can actually read the damn font. Your cries have been answered, people.
Well, I hope we don't lose your voice in all those changes then. I kind of like and I know I'm fluffing you on live here, but like, I like how it has your voice to it. It's my favorite. I've finally learned what that meant, by the way, now that I'm learning how to write.
Right. Yeah. To your writer's voice. And here's the suggestion I was going to say. There's a really great book, and I can't remember the name of the author, but it's called Writing Without Bullshit.
I've got it. I've read it.
Fantastic book.
That one and How to Write a Sentence.
Better writer, pick that up. It will make you a better writer. All right, man. So I'll be back on Wednesday. I'm probably going to just do a Q&A for this Wednesday unless I get an interview that I'm trying to work out right now. If it doesn't work out, I'll just be doing a Q&A. It'll be Rollo solo, and you guys can get your questions answered. Also, here's the thing. If you want counseling, I'm still taking counseling, but I'm sort of backing up off of it right now because I'm focusing primarily on the book. If there is something that you want to hit me up on, if you have a question, if you want to discuss your situation, if you have like what I call a case study, ask it during the Q&A. Like, feel free to pay me whatever you want to. I mean, kick me down $20 if you were going to, for counseling anyways. But if you think other people can benefit from it, the best place for you to do that is to ask in the Q&As. So keep that in mind. One of these days we need to do a Q&A for Rule Zero. We need to just
that would be fun.
It's all going to be, Q&A and throw them at us. So that would be, I think we should do that at some point too. All right, Ryan, it's been fun. I will see you on Saturday if you're not in Europe or snowed in.
Oh no, I think I'll be snowed in. But either way, I'll see you then. We'll talk to you guys later. Enjoy your dinner.
All right, we'll see you later.